Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. The second guest of the day co-hosts the PFG Vibecast, writes for Fansides, NFL Spin Zone, Elite Sports New York, and WBLZ Media. Russell Baxter, how are you doing?
I'm good, Madison. How are you?
I'm good. Can't wait to get the football season started. Thursday night, Bears and the Packers. It should be a fun season ahead. We're going to start with making predictions for the season. We'll go division by division. Not necessarily divisions. We'll talk about who we like in every division, but not necessarily our official picks. But some of them are easy and some of them are hard. The AFC East is among one of the easier ones, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, a team that's, by the way, not only the only team to win 10 straight division titles, they're the only team to reach the playoffs 10 straight years in the history of the NFL. And, of course, we're talking about the New England Patriots. Miami is in strict rebuilding mode. And by the way, they should be. They are a team that has been trying to fix their issues for more than a decade with quick fixes and spending money and, exorbitant contracts, and they need to gut that thing. And that's why they have 13 draft choices next year. The team that intrigues me the most in there that could possibly challenge the Patriots are the Bills. And that's because of what they did on the offensive line, getting Ed Oliver on the defensive line. They have to match up with New England in that sense, in the trenches. New England won that Super Bowl last year, Madison, because of their offensive line. They played power football, especially in the playoffs, ran for at least 150 yards in each one of their playoff games. I think that's the kind of style they'll put forth at least early on in the season. You never know with Bill Belichick. He kind of changes things as time goes on and so on. But, yeah, someone's going to have to prove they can knock off the New England Patriots, and, no one's done that since the Dolphins won the division in 2008.
Yep, the Dolphins won that division, and that was the year that the former Jet quarterback, why am I blanking on his name? And it was the year Brady, Chad Pennington, yes. And Brady tore his ACL that year, so the Dolphins took advantage of that. And they made the playoffs a few years ago, the Dolphins. I remember the year Tannehill got hurt, they made the postseason with Adam Gase. So they're not that far removed from the playoffs, but yeah, right now they are clearly in a rebuilding phase. I'm with you on the Bills in terms of a possible surprise, but I like the Jets team a little bit better because of the addition of Le'Veon Bell, and I like Adam Gase a lot. But to me, the Bills and the Jets have difficult schedules. They have to play the Patriots twice. They have to play the Cowboys and the Eagles over in the NFC East. They have to play the Steelers. They have to play the Browns. So those two teams have pretty tough schedules facing ahead of them. So I'm not convinced that one of those two teams will have a winning record, although I think both of those teams will be better. How about the AFC North?
Well, that's toughy because of what the improvement of a couple of teams. But on the other hand, you look at Cincinnati. It's another team that I think is in for a long year. Massive problems on the offensive line. They tried to address it with their first pick, Jonah Williams, and he got hurt, and he's not going to play this year. So I think it was Kevin Zeitler who retired. Not Kevin Zeitler, I'm sorry. One of their guards retired. I misspoke. Zeitler's with the Giants, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Zeitler used to be with the Bengals. Now he's with the Giants. But they've had trouble on the offensive line. They're going to start the season without A.J. Green. Their defense was the worst in the league last year in terms of total yards allowed and passing yards allowed. They have serious questions at linebacker. They still have Geno Atkins. They still have Carlos Dunlap. They still have some good skilled people and so on. But I just think they're in for a tough year. I'm very curious to see what Baltimore's going to look like this year. New offense, kind of picking up where they left off, but with even more emphasis on what they were doing late last year. Greg Roman's the new offensive coordinator. Defensively, though, no Terrell Suggs, no C.J. Mosley, no Zadarius Smith, no Eric Weddle. That's a lot of key departures. I'll be curious what happens there. Obviously, everybody very high on the Browns for the most part. Offensively, they could be a lot of fun to watch. Defensively, they added Olivier Vernon and Sheldon Richardson to the defensive line. But I think Pittsburgh is still very, very intriguing. I know people want to talk about who is not there. And, of course, Le'Veon Bell wasn't there at all last year. Antonio Brown is gone. James Washington has had a sensational preseason. The thing that stands out the most about the Steelers is their increased speed on defense with Devin Bush and Mark Barrett and Steven Nelson, who they got from the Chiefs. I think it's a three-team race with the Bengals kind of, bringing up the rear. But I think any one of the Steelers, Browns, or Ravens could do it. The thing to keep an eye on with Cleveland last year that kind of went under the radar, Madison, was the fact that was a team that struggled for a long time to win a divisional game. And they actually went 3-2-1 in the division. They just haven't been able to beat the Steelers for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's right. They really haven't beaten the Steelers. I mean, they've beaten the Ravens a few times. They'll probably beat the Bengals this year. I remember them beating the Bengals last year. They killed the Bengals in Cleveland last year. I think the Browns are poised for a big year. The Steelers are a team with a chip on its shoulder. And the Ravens can sneak up on some people, although they did last year. But I feel like people are down on the Ravens. Even me, myself, I'm a little down on the Ravens because I'm higher on the Browns and the Steelers than Baltimore. But that should be an interesting division and one of the better divisions in the league. How about the AFC South? Obviously, the Luck news and then the Texans making some interesting moves.
Yeah, this has been a wild division the last 2 years. I refer to it, Madison, I'm dating myself here. I refer to the AFC South as the Poseidon Adventure. In 2017, from top to bottom, it was Jacksonville, Tennessee, Indianapolis, and Houston. Okay? Last year, it was Houston, Indianapolis, Tennessee, and Jacksonville. Completely reversed, 1 through 4. And it could look like it did last year after what we saw the last couple of weeks. You want to talk about a division of craziness over the last 2 weeks, the sudden retirement of Andrew Luck. Jadeveon Clowney is now a Seattle Seahawk. Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills are members of the Houston Texans. And never mind the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars went out and got Nick Foles this offseason. I think Houston, to me, Indianapolis was on a path to really challenge for the top spot in the AFC, much less the AFC South. And I still think they'll be a solid team because the one thing they started to move away from last year was being totally dependent on the quarterback. And as we find out in this league, it doesn't work. You've got to rely on balance. They became a very balanced football team when they won 9 of those last 10 games. Marlon Mack, that offensive line led by Quentin Nelson, they're going to play, obviously, a big role in what they do offensively. Defensively, they're getting better. But I just think Houston now, I'm trying to imagine, Madison, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, and DeAndre Hopkins all lining up at the same time.
That's going to be something to watch. I love Hopkins. That guy's talented. Lamar Miller to Carlos Hyde is not that bad of a drop-off, in my opinion. Although Miller helped them last year, and they're probably going to miss him this year. I don't mind Carlos Hyde for them. I think the Texans are going to be a fun team to watch this year. I love the Tunsil move. Jacksonville's going to be interesting with Foles, obviously. And people like Indy, even though Luck's not there anymore, I know they just paid Brissett 2 years, $30 million. Obviously, the Colts have the offensive line and some talent on defense now. They can get it done. So I'm interested to see what happens in the AFC South. Who do you like out in the AFC West?
Well, I mean, I still think it's a two-team race between the Chiefs and the Chargers. And the Chargers, who last year proved how resilient they were. Oh, by the way, can I jump back for a second? Because we talked that whole division. We never mentioned the Tennessee Titans, who, of course, had Marcus Mariota, but they brought in Ryan Tannehill. They're a team that relies heavily on the run, but they're not going to have Taylor Lewan, the left tackle, for the first 4 games. So
that's a loss.
I'll be made to see what happens with them. Anyway, back to the West. Kansas City went out, and, it just shows you no matter how many points you score, if you can't stop anyone, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Madison, consider this. Including the playoffs last year, the Kansas City Chiefs played the New England Patriots twice. They scored 40 points, and they scored 31 points. And they lost both games.
Yep. I remember the regular season game in Foxborough and then the playoff game last year. And if it wasn't for that offsides, maybe the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. So you never know with these things sometimes. And I'm a big Patrick Mahomes fan. I think it's a two-horse race in the AFC West as well. And obviously, of the two rebuilding teams, well, one of them's rebuilding, the other one is trying to win. I mean, the Broncos, I think, are a little bit trying to win with the Flacco move, and the Raiders are the team that's rebuilding. I'm interested to see what both those teams look like. Obviously, AB with the Raiders, and then Flacco with the Broncos, though. Like, those two teams are going to be interesting, but I don't think they're going to be good. What do you make about the Broncos and the Raiders in that division?
I think the Broncos are going to try to recapture the kind of form that led them to the Super Bowl 4 years ago when they won Super Bowl 50. Remember, that offense was Peyton Manning on his last legs, and the fact he got hurt, and then it was Brock Osweiler during the season, and that team turned over the ball 31 times during the regular season, very mistake-prone. But their defense was lights out, probably with the exception of one game that year. They pretty much stifled everybody. They played Pittsburgh and New England and Carolina in the playoffs and held them to a combined 44 points. 2 years earlier, they played the Seahawks in the Super Bowl and gave up 43 in one afternoon. So that's what I think Vic Fangio is trying to recapture. He's got Bradley Chubb opposite of Von Miller. They need to get better play from the offensive line, and they need Flacco to be kind of like postseason Flacco, even with some of the ups and downs he's had. He started off his career back in 2008 and was shaky in the playoffs, even though the team won. He actually became a better postseason quarterback as time wore on. It's funny, for what it's worth, and I don't know if they're getting to the playoffs this year, but Joe Flacco's thrown at least 2 touchdown passes, Madison, in 8 straight postseason games. So he knows a little something about how to play in the playoffs once he gets to the playoffs. But, with the Chargers and the Chiefs, you're kind of hard-pressed to move up. And, you think about Denver now. At one time when Peyton Manning was there, they kind of owned Kansas City. If my math is correct, the Broncos have lost 7 straight games to the Chiefs now.
Wow, that's a lot. I would have thought that, especially with the home field there in Denver. Denver almost had them last year. I remember on a Monday night game when Mahomes led the Chiefs to a comeback, and Mahomes had a bit of an MVP moment there in Denver. I remember that from last year. How about the NFC East? I believe that's a 2-horse race as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Philadelphia's got a lot of horses, maybe the most horses in the NFC, as a matter of fact. Howie Roseman went out and replenished his defensive line, added Malik Jackson, brought back Timmy Jernigan when it looks like he wasn't necessarily going to be there. He rebuilt the depth on that defensive line, which was so pivotal when they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Strengthened the offensive line, went out and got a workhorse runner in Jordan Howard, not flashy, not fast, but 250-plus carries in each of his first 3 seasons with the Bears. A lot of talk about can Wentz stay healthy. People forget he did start all 16 games as a rookie. I kind of felt last year that maybe they rushed him a little back and so on, and that's kind of how, his whole season kind of transpired, unfortunately. So Dallas, to me, is a very talented team. I think they actually changed philosophies. Wasn't that long ago, Madison, that Dallas used their running game to hide their defense. Their defense doesn't need to be hidden anymore. DeMarcus Lawrence, Jalen Smith, Byron Jones, Leighton Vander Esch. That's a big play defense, top 5 defense in the league as far as I'm concerned. So, as we record this, there's all kinds of, rumors that Ezekiel Elliott, the Cowboys made another big offer. Is he on his way back? Who knows if he's around for the Week 1 game against the Giants. But Washington, to me, has some big work to do. And the Giants, to me, they showed a little spark in the second half of last year, but still closed out the year with 3 straight losses. There's still a lot of work for Edelman and Shermer to do there and so on. But who doesn't like watching Saquon Barkley?
Saquon Barkley, in my opinion, is the best running back in the league. He is a joy to watch. And it's just unfortunate that I don't think the Giants are going to be that great of a team this year. I think that they are probably like a 5-6 win team. And same can be said about the Washington Redskins. To me, the biggest storyline with those 2 teams is the rookie quarterbacks. Do you think you see them this year, the 2 rookies?
I think we have a better chance of seeing Haskins than we do Jones. That's not the saying that we won't see both. But if you had to ask me which one makes their appearance first, I think it'll be Dwayne Haskins. Case Keenum, he had the big year in Denver, which is really kind of big year in Minnesota, which is really kind of the exception to the rule when it comes to his career. He went to Denver last year and was very, very mediocre. He's just kind of hold on to things, biding times. I won't be surprised if we see Dwayne Haskins, sometime by the middle of the year.
Yeah, I think Haskins is out there before Jones as well, although I think we see both this year. I'll give you that. I think we see both. How about in the NFC North? I think that's the best division in the league. 3 teams can win that division.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even rule out Detroit doing it, to be honest with you. They've got to learn how to beat Minnesota and Chicago. They got swept by both of them last year. Suddenly they had to beat the Packers, which they couldn't do for a long time. Matt Patricia had a really interesting year. Week 1 against the Jets on a Monday night, the team gets its doors blown off. 2 weeks later, they push around the New England Patriots on Sunday Night Football. So, same old story with the Lions in terms of consistency. It's a club that hasn't won a playoff game in 28 years. They haven't won a division in 26 years. Meanwhile, the other teams, you look at what Minnesota did in the draft, added a dozen players, got a new center. I think their defense will pick up where it left off last year, Madison. They started out shaky last year. I think they were still kind of recovering from the NFC title game in Philadelphia. The thing about the Vikings is better offensive line play, and if Kirk Cousins is going to get sacked, Kirk Cousins has to learn how to hang on to that football. There are a lot of quarterbacks in this league, or a number of quarterbacks in this league, when they get sacked, who don't cough up the football as easily as Kirk Cousins. He has to do a much better job in that regard. Chicago, that defense, I don't think it'll take a step backwards per se with Chuck Pagano, but Chuck Pagano's going to do different things than Vic Fangio did. I think Mitch Trubisky takes another step forward. He's got a lot of weapons on offense. Green Bay's very, very intriguing. They have a new head coach for the first time in an awfully long time. But they also spent money in free agency for the first time in an awfully long time. And not all on one person, like a Julius Peppers or a Charles Woodson or a Reggie White. They signed Darius Smith and Preston Smith and Adrian Amos. And, Mike Pettin's got a lot of good tools to work with. A couple of first-round picks on defense as well. I think I'll put it this way. I think it's a 3.5 team race. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does make sense because you seem to be higher on the Lions than I am. All right, the NFC South.
Well, this is another division that has quality teams, okay? And I think the most intriguing of the teams is Tampa Bay. And what makes them intriguing is one person, and that's Bruce Arians. Can Bruce Arians go in and fix Jameis Winston? He's been a turnover machine in 4 seasons. He's made his share of spectacular plays. We know he's supremely talented. He can, get out of the pocket. He's got a strong arm. But he makes these mind-boggling throws some days and puts his team in harm's way far too often. Bruce Arians has to fix that. They have talent at the other spots. They've also proven that they can beat teams in the division. They went to New Orleans last year and won a game. They have fared better in the division than you would think for a team that's 5-11. Now, last year they didn't have a tremendous amount of success within the division and so on and again. But I don't doubt the talent base there. With Mike Evans and Levante David on defense, and Gerald McCoy, I know is not there anymore. But then again, in that division, you're looking at a Saints team that's won the division the last 2 years. They're 24-8 the last 2 years. 2 mind-boggling playoff losses. They look as balanced as ever. No Mark Ingram, but now Latavius Murray. I also look at Atlanta. What are the chances that Atlanta goes through another season like they did the first 3 weeks of last year, where they lost Deion Jones and Keanu Neal and Ricardo Allen, 2 of them for the year. So if they can stay healthy, we know what their offense can do. Devontae Freeman's back as well. Carolina, to me, is kind of the wild card. I think they'll be better on defense, but I don't know how much support Cam Newton has other than Christian McCaffrey. Greg Olson's had injury problems the last 2 years. be interesting to see if he can stay healthy. I don't know about their offensive line.
Yeah, Carolina to me is a huge wild card, and to me it's all about Cam and his injury concerns with his shoulder. If Cam's healthy, I think that team could potentially win the division. If not, then it can go south quickly. To me, that is the biggest, perhaps, wild card team of the season. What about in the NFC West?
Well, I think the Rams are still champions until the throne, but they got Seattle really breathing down their neck. It was very interesting last year. The Seattle Seahawks, in 2 games against the Rams, scored exactly 31 points in each game, Madison, and lost both of them. The Rams can score points with the best of them, although their offense seemed to slump a little down the stretch. They missed Cooper Kupp, I think, in a big way. They obviously missed Todd Gurley. They got, Roger Saffold is no longer with the team. He's with the Tennessee Titans. That's a little blow to the offensive line. Defensively, they have new guys like Clay Matthews and Eric Weddle. And Dominican Sue's not there. I thought he was a spotty player for them last year. Got hot late in the year. I think the guy the Rams are going to miss on defense is LaMarcus Joyner, the free safety who went to the Oakland Raiders. Seattle is like your classic last-minute shopper. Okay? Remember in April, a couple days before the draft, they had 4 draft choices. All of a sudden, they swung the deal with Kansas City. Frank Clark goes to the Chiefs. Do some more wheeling and dealing. And how many picks and players did they come out in the draft? 11. Just like the other day, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here come the Seahawks to grab Jadeveon Clowney. They swing that deal. John Schneider sometimes doesn't get enough credit for the job he does out there. I think he'll be right on the Rams' tail. I know a lot of people are high on San Francisco, but they have to show me a little something first. And it's less about Jimmy Garoppolo staying healthy, and it's just more of them offensively. They proved last year that with key people missing at the skill positions, they could still move the football and be productive. But I don't know if it's possible, almost accidentally, if a team could go to another year in this day and age, Madison, and as a defense record 2 interceptions in 16 games. 2.
That's crazy. I didn't even know that was the number of interceptions they had a year ago. That's just insane to me. But yeah, San Francisco has to prove it to me as well, especially on the defensive side of the football. I know what Garoppolo's capable of doing. I know they have some good pieces offensively. To me, it's all about their defense and whether that unit takes the next step. Okay, let's do some miscellaneous stuff around the league. Who's a coach that you think is on the hot seat?
Let's see. A coach on the hot seat. It would probably be someone who's been there with their team for a few years and not necessarily gotten the job done. I don't know if hot seat is necessarily the right word, but I think there's a little pressure, Madison, on Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. Now, I know some of that has been injury. That's been some of the issues, okay? But I'll be curious to see how the Niners play out this year. And listen, the management has shown they have not been adverse to making coaching changes. I know him and Lynch signed big contracts, long-term contracts, and so on. A hot seat would be a little strong. Maybe how about a curling iron? How about just a little heat from above?
Okay.
And so on. I think that's entirely possible. I look at some of the other teams around the league. It's funny. People almost want to put Jason Garrett on the hot seat, but I don't think he's going anywhere because of the way the team is built. I think Jay Gruden could feel a little heat in Washington, for whatever reason. Of course, how are you going to explain what happened to them at quarterback last year when Alex Smith goes down and a couple weeks later Colt McCoy breaks his leg as well? We have a bunch of new hires. We have 8 new head coaching hires around the league, so it's hard to imagine. I think the guys who people perceive to be on the hot seat, like a Mike Tomlin, because of how the off season was going for a while, I think that's backed off a little. I think one other person that might be intriguing to mention, okay, because of the way the team is structured right now, is Bill O'Brien. And I say that in the fact that they still have not hired a general manager. And yet the organization went out and made all these deals the other day and basically sacrificed the next couple of years in terms of high draft choices. Houston looks like a team that, they want to get something done here like in the next 2 years, because if they don't, they're going to have to manufacture ways to get young players. No first-round picks in 2020 or 2021. So, I think it's awful early hot seat-wise. I don't think there's any coach out there who's under, a super amount of pressure. I should say that the opposite. Every coach is always under pressure. But I think that when you factor in how many newcomers there are, along with certain situations, like Atlanta was a big disappointment last year, but we already talked about how they lost key players in the first 3 weeks of the season. So, to me, a coaching change is necessary when the team is not responding. I don't think I've seen any of that so far, but obviously a couple of these situations bear watching.
Yes, you got to keep an eye on a bunch of these situations because you never know what way it could go. You mentioned Gruden in Washington. Shanahan in San Francisco is one that you mentioned to me on the podcast just now. I've thought about him, and he's not getting talked about in terms of coaches under pressure. We just talked about coaches under pressure. How about a player under pressure this season to deliver for his team?
Well, I think to a degree there's certainly some heat on Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh, given how the whole offseason went down, depending on who you wanted to blame for the turmoil in the Steel City. Was it Tomlin? Was it Ben? Was it Brown? Was it the organization? Throw in the Le'Veon Bell thing. I know this. Ben Roethlisberger has taken obviously steps to change what's happened the last couple of years. He's not doing that radio show anymore, which seems to be to a lot of angst. Other players per se under pressure. I think to a degree there's a little pressure on Lamar Jackson because of expectations. I think people still see him as a one-dimensional player, which I think is totally unfair because we don't have that big of a sample size. When Lamar Jackson played a lot last year, but he wasn't the starter for the first 9 games. They used him on different gimmicks and design plays and so on. I think it's hard to put a guy on a hot seat per se, but I can understand because of the decision Baltimore made to jettison Joe Flacco, where a lot falls on him. I look at Eli Manning and how that's going to play out because, it seems to me that the Giants feel good about their choice of Daniel Jones as the eventual successor, but when does the eventual happen? I think Eli's going to have to play very, very poorly for that to happen. I mean, listen, we've only seen Eli miss 1 game since he became the starter. 7 weeks left in 2004. And the only guy to sack him out of the game was Ben McAdoo. Well, he doesn't get hurt. Obviously, he's on the downside of his career, and understandably so. But I think the microscope will be even brighter on here. It's funny. When Daniel Jones, I don't have to tell you, when Daniel Jones was selected back in April and people were scratching their heads, et cetera, there was like, what are the Giants doing? Now Daniel Jones has made a pretty good account of himself, and all of a sudden the script has flipped a little on Manning.
Yeah, I was one of those people scratching their heads on draft night, and Daniel Jones.
A lot of people weren't alone, so.
Yeah, I wasn't alone, and Daniel Jones really, even though I don't judge people on preseason play very much, right. But he showed me a lot of poise in the preseason as he's got the playing time. He led that drive against the Jets, and then he had a couple moments against the Bengals and a good Bears defense as well. So Jones really showed me a lot in that preseason, and I hope the Giants give him some time, which I think they might towards the end of the season. All right, last thing for you. Bold prediction of this season.
The bold prediction of the season? Well, that would probably entail a team that a lot of people think will be playoffs, but not necessarily make it. I have to think about that because I haven't done any of my playoff picks or so on. Now maybe I could go in a different direction and so on. How about the Denver Broncos challenging the NFL sack record?
That's a good one.
Which was 72 in 1984 by the Chicago Bears. Okay?
Yep.
Listen, there's a good pass rushing team that's out there. But Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, they're going to have to do some things defensively to protect themselves against the run. They're going to have to try to win like they did in 2015. And I won't be surprised if Vic Fangio turns everyone loose. Okay? Now, we've seen a couple teams with 50-something sacks. The Steelers had, and Chiefs had 52. The year before that, Pittsburgh and Jacksonville had 56 and 55, respectively. 72 is a pretty tall order, but we're also in a day and age where teams are dropping back an awful lot. So I'm going to say the Broncos maybe hit the 60 sack record, 60 sack mark.
That would not dumbfind me because obviously you have Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. That's one of the best pass rushing duos in the whole league. So that was a pretty good prediction. I'll throw one at you too for fun's sake. I'm going to say that the Matt Ryan of the Falcons has a great season and he's in the top 5 for passing yards this year for in total passing yards for quarterbacks.
Yeah, well, I can see that. I think very quietly because of the year they had last. Remember when Matt Ryan won the MVP, Madison, 2 years ago? He threw 38 touchdown passes and 7 picks. Last year on a banged-up football team, and that, the fact that they had to score points in some instances. Remember, they lost a bunch of high-scoring games early in the season, 37-36 to the Bengals and 43-37 to the Saints in overtime. Very quietly, Matt Ryan threw 35 touchdowns and 7 picks last year, almost identical numbers to his MVP season. So, yeah, I could see that. I think the Falcons are very... By the way, old friend back with the Falcons, Dirk Cutter, who worked with Ryan the early part of Ryan's career, is now back as the Falcons' offensive coordinator.
Yep, I think I mentioned that in this podcast, or maybe it was with my first guest. I don't remember if I mentioned Cutter on this podcast or not. Well, maybe I'll have you on again during the season, maybe at the midpoint, and we'll talk about the season and what's transpired and whatnot. So, hope you have a great day, and let's go football. I'm happy that the season's back.
Me too. In fact, I know the perfect time to have me on. Entering Week 17, the Denver Broncos have 59 sacks.
I'll think about you during the holiday season when it's almost December 29th. I know that's the Sunday of the last week of the season because I know that New Year's Eve is falling on a Tuesday this year and Christmas is a Wednesday.
It'll be here before you know it.
And it'll be here before you know it. Have a good night.
Thanks, man.